Happy birthday to me, Dave. Now everyone gets to meet the truth.
I was blowing out the candles on my 30th birthday cake when my husband's work wife leaned over and wiped a smudge of frosting off his lip. He looked at her like she was the only woman in the room. He had no idea my revenge was waiting right outside. People always say that when your marriage falls apart, there's this massive, explosive moment, a lipstick stain on a collar, a motel receipt, a tearful confession in the middle of a thunderstorm. But they're wrong. Most of the time, the end of a marriage is a series of tiny, invisible paper cuts. You bleed out slowly, pretending everything is fine until you finally look down and realize you're standing in a puddle of your own shattered reality. My husband Dave and I had been married for 5 years. We met in our early 20s, back when he was a struggling junior account executive and I was an aspiring interior designer. We built our life in a beautiful, sunlit suburban home in Connecticut. For a long time, we were the couple our friends envied. We hosted Thanksgiving, we had the golden retriever named Buster, and we had the inside jokes that made us feel completely bulletproof. Then came Jessica. She started at Dave's firm about 14 months before my 30th birthday. At first, she was just a name casually dropped over dinner. Jessica in marketing had this crazy idea today, or Jessica saved my ass in the quarterly review. I didn't think anything of it. I am a secure woman. I've never been the jealous type, and Dave and I had trust. But then the casual mentions turned into a constant low-frequency hum in the background of our lives. It started with the phone buzzing at 9:30 p.m. We'd be on the couch watching Netflix, and his screen would light up. He'd glance at it, smile a little too eagerly, and type a rapid-fire response. When I asked who it was, he'd wave it off with a casual, "Just Jess. She can't figure out the formatting on the Miller presentation." At 9:30 on a Tuesday? I asked once, pausing the TV. Dave sighed, running a hand through his hair, looking at me like I was a child who didn't understand the grown-up corporate world. "Chloe, she's new. She's hungry to prove herself. It's just work. Don't be weird about it. Don't be weird about it." That became his favorite phrase. By month 6, she had officially graduated to the title of work wife. Dave actually used that term during a barbecue we hosted for his colleagues. He was grilling burgers, and Jessica, who I met for the first time that day, came strolling out onto our patio in a sundress that looked suspiciously expensive and highly impractical for a backyard cookout. She was a striking woman, tall, with perfectly blown-out honey blonde hair, and a laugh that was just a little too loud, a little too musical. "Oh, let me help you with that, work hubby," she had chirped, grabbing a pair of tongs and bumping her hip playfully against Dave's. I was standing 3 feet away, holding a tray of potato salad. Dave laughed, his face flushing a deep crimson, and they fell into this effortless, sparkling banter about some spreadsheet error that felt like an inside joke I wasn't allowed to understand. I remember the ice-cold feeling that washed over me. It wasn't just that she was flirting, it was that he was letting her. Worse, he was actively participating. The paper cuts kept coming. There was the time I found a receipt for a $150 bottle of Cabernet in his coat pocket. When I asked if we were saving it for a special occasion, he awkwardly explained that he and Jessica had closed a big account and bought it to celebrate. Just the two of them. There was the distinct smell of expensive, musky perfume that occasionally lingered on his suits, a scent that definitely wasn't my floral Chanel. Whenever I tried to bring it up, the gaslighting was masterful. "Chloe, you're being paranoid," he'd say, his voice thick with disappointment. "She's like a sister to me. Honestly, you insulting my professional integrity like this is really hurting our marriage." He made me feel crazy. I started going to therapy. I cried to my best friend, Sarah, telling her that maybe I was just projecting my own insecurities onto my husband. I spent months trying to be the cool wife. I baked cookies for his office. I sent him to work with a smile. I tried to suppress the knot of pure anxiety that tightened in my chest every time his phone chimed. But the intuition of a woman is a terrifyingly precise instrument. You can ignore it, you can numb it, but it never actually goes away. 3 months before my 30th birthday, the dam broke. Dave was in the shower, and his iPad, which was synced to his iPhone messages, lit up on the nightstand. I never snooped. I believed snooping was the nail in the coffin of trust. But the preview text flashed across the screen, and the words practically burned themselves into my retinas. Jessica, can't stop thinking about the hotel bar in Chicago. You still owe me a drink for that, Mr. Harrison. Dave sent earlier. You looked incredible in that black dress. Hard to focus on the clients. My heart didn't just break, it completely shattered, sending icy shards into my stomach. Chicago. That was a mandatory regional conference he had attended 3 weeks prior. He had told me he spent the evenings exhausted in his room, eating room service and catching up on sleep. I sat on the edge of the bed, the sound of the running shower echoing from the master bathroom, and I felt a bizarre, frightening calm wash over me. I didn't scream. I didn't throw his iPad at the glass shower door. I didn't confront him. Instead, I unlocked the iPad. His passcode was our anniversary, the ultimate irony, and I started taking photos of the screen with my own phone. I documented everything, the late night texts, the shared complaints about me. Chloe just doesn't understand the pressure we're under. Jess, the thinly veiled sexual tension that masqueraded as office banter. I realized in that moment that Dave wasn't just having an affair. He was living a completely double life, feeding his ego with this younger, adoring colleague, while keeping me around to fold his laundry and keep his house warm. I decided right then and there, I wasn't going to just divorce him. I was going to obliterate him. The weeks leading up to my 30th birthday were the most surreal of my life. I was living with a ghost. Dave was physically in the house, but his mind was miles away, permanently tethered to the ping of his cell phone. I played my part perfectly. I smiled. I made his favorite dinners. I kissed his cheek when he left for work. But behind the scenes, I was a woman at war. I hired a private investigator using money from my personal savings account, an account Dave had no access to. I needed to know exactly who Jessica was, what they were doing, and how deep this rot went. The PI, a gruff, retired state trooper named Frank, took only 2 weeks to hand me a manila folder that read like a cheap daytime soap opera. Not only were Dave and Jessica sleeping together, Frank had photos of them entering a midtown boutique hotel on 3 separate lunch breaks, but Jessica had a massive secret of her own. She wasn't the single, carefree, independent career woman she portrayed at the office. Jessica was engaged. And not just to anybody. She was engaged to Arthur Pendleton, a highly successful, intensely private commercial real estate developer. Arthur was 15 years older than Jessica, came from old New England money, and had practically funded her entire lavish lifestyle. The condo she claimed she bought with her first big bonus? Arthur's. The Mercedes she drove? A lease under Arthur's company. According to Frank's report, Jessica kept Arthur completely isolated from her work life. Arthur thought she was a hard-working corporate angel climbing the ladder. Dave thought she was a fun, unattached colleague who just got him. She was playing them both, spinning plates, enjoying the wealthy security of Arthur and the thrilling, illicit office romance with my husband. It was a gold mine. Meanwhile, my birthday was approaching. Dave, acting out of what I can only assume was profound, subconscious guilt, suggested we throw a party. "Let's do it big, Chloe," he said one evening over dinner, pouring us both a glass of wine. "You only turn 30 once. Let's cater it, get a bartender, invite all our friends. You deserve to be celebrated." I looked at him, searching his eyes for any hint of the monster I knew lived beneath the surface. He looked so earnest, it made my stomach turn. "That sounds wonderful, Dave." I smiled, sipping my wine. "Who should we invite?" "Well, your friends, obviously. Sarah, the girls from your studio. And I was thinking I'd invite a few people from the office, just the inner circle. Mike, Greg, and Jessica, of course. She's been asking what we're doing for your birthday. She actually helped me pick out your present." She helped him pick out my present. The audacity was breathtaking. He wanted to parade his mistress into my home, on my birthday, and have her play a role in the gift he was giving me. It was a sick power trip. He wanted to have his cake and eat it right in front of me. "Oh, Jessica?" I forced my voice to stay light. "Sure, she's always so lively. It'll be great to have her." "Awesome," he grinned, looking genuinely relieved. "I'll let her know." The next day, I was doing laundry when I found the receipt in his suit jacket. It was from Tiffany & Co., $3,500. A diamond teardrop pendant. My heart did a strange little flutter. Part of me, the pathetic, broken part that still loved the man I married, thought, maybe he is going to end it with her. Maybe this is his guilt gift to me. to start over. But the next night, I checked his iPad again while he slept. Dave, picked up the little blue box today. Can't wait to see it on you. Jessica, you shouldn't have, but I can't wait. I'll wear it to the party. Chloe won't even notice. She's so oblivious. Dave, she really is. Love you, work wifey. I didn't cry. The tears were completely gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve that felt like steel in my spine. I was oblivious, was I? The next morning, I made a phone call. I called Arthur Pendleton's office. Getting through to a man of his stature wasn't easy, but I told his assistant it was a personal matter regarding a mutual investment, and I dropped Jessica's name. 10 minutes later, Arthur was on the line. His voice was deep, cultured, and impatient. This is Arthur. To whom am I speaking? Mr. Pendleton, my name is Chloe Harrison. You don't know me, but my husband works with your fiancée, Jessica. Right, Dave Harrison. I've heard the name, Arthur said. What can I do for you, Mrs. Harrison? I have reason to believe no. I have definitive proof that our partners are intimately involved, I said, keeping my voice steady. I have photographs, hotel receipts, and text messages. I thought you would want to know before you marry her. There was a long, heavy silence on the other end of the line. For a second, I thought he might hang up. When he finally spoke, his voice was dangerously quiet. Where are you right now? I met Arthur at a high-end coffee shop in a neighboring town an hour later. He was an imposing man, impeccably dressed in a tailored navy suit, with sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. I slid the manila folder across the table. He opened it and spent 10 excruciating minutes flipping through Frank's detailed surveillance photos and the printed screenshots of the texts. I watched his jaw clench. I watched the betrayal wash over his face, mirroring the exact same agony I had lived with for weeks. But Arthur didn't break down. He closed the folder, folded his hands on the table, and looked at me. She told me she was going to Chicago for a solo retreat, Arthur said, his voice flat. She used my credit card to book her flights. I'm so sorry, Arthur, I whispered. Don't be, he said coldly. Better now than after the wedding. He paused, looking at me with a newfound respect. Why didn't you just confront him? Why come to me? Because, I said, leaning in. Dave is throwing a massive 30th birthday party for me this Saturday at our house. He has invited Jessica. They think I'm a fool. They think they are the smartest people in the room. I don't want to just serve him divorce papers on a random Tuesday. I want him to feel exactly how I feel right now. Cornered, humiliated, exposed. A slow, grim smile spread across Arthur's face. Mrs. Harrison, what exactly do you have in mind? We sat there for another hour and drafted the guest list for the greatest performance of my life. Saturday night arrived, crisp and clear. Our house looked like something out of a lifestyle magazine. The caterers had set up a beautiful grazing table on the mahogany dining room table. String lights were draped across the back patio, and a bartender was mixing craft cocktails in the kitchen. I wore a sleek, emerald green silk dress that clung to my curves. I had spent 2 hours at the salon getting a blowout and professional makeup. If this was going to be the funeral of my marriage, I was going to be the best-looking widow in the state. Dave looked handsome in a casual blazer and dark jeans. He kissed my cheek as the first guests arrived, playing the role of the doting, loving husband. You look breathtaking, Chloe, he whispered, wrapping his arm around my waist. Happy birthday, baby. Thank you, Dave. I smiled, looking him dead in the eyes. This is going to be a night we will never forget. By 8 p.m., the house was packed. Sarah was there, sticking close to my side, occasionally shooting nervous glances at the door. She was the only one who knew the plan. The low hum of jazz music mixed with the chatter of our friends, neighbors, and Dave's coworkers. At 8:15 p.m., the doorbell rang, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. I watched from the kitchen island as Dave rushed to the front door. He opened it, and there she was, Jessica. She was wearing a backless crimson-red cocktail dress that was highly inappropriate for a casual suburban house party. It screamed for attention. Her hair was perfectly styled, and she held a cheap bottle of Prosecco with a bright red bow on it. Dave, she squealed, hugging him. And not just a polite, professional hug. She pressed her body against his, lingering just a fraction of a second too long, her hands resting on his chest. Hey, Jess! Glad you made it, Dave said, his voice dropping an octave. He was practically vibrating with nervous excitement. She walked into the house like she owned it. She immediately made a beeline for me, plastering a massive fake smile on her face. "Chloe! Oh my gosh! Happy birthday!" she sang, thrusting the cheap Prosecco into my hands. "You look so cute!" "I hope you don't mind I crashed the party," Dave insisted. "Not at all, Jessica," I said, my voice smooth as glass. "I wouldn't have had this party without you." "Oh, you're too sweet," she giggled, completely missing the sarcasm. As she turned to walk toward the bar, the overhead pendant light caught the sparkle at the base of her throat. There it was, the $3,500 Tiffany teardrop diamond pendant, resting perfectly against her collarbone. Sarah, standing next to me, saw it too. She gripped my arm tightly. "Is that?" she hissed under her breath. "Yep," I murmured, taking a long sip of my martini. Let them dig their graves. For the next hour, I watched the most pathetic display of arrogance I have ever witnessed. Dave and Jessica weren't even trying to be discreet. They were constantly in each other's orbit. If Dave was at the grill, Jessica was standing right next to him, laughing loudly at his jokes, touching his arm. If Jessica was at the bar, Dave was there, leaning in close, whispering in her ear. Several of my friends noticed. My neighbor, Karen, pulled me aside. "Chloe, is everything okay with Dave and that blonde girl? They're acting a little friendly." "Oh, that's just his work wife," I said loudly enough for a few people to hear. "They're very close." At 9 p.m., Dave clapped his hands together, standing in the center of the living room. "All right, everyone, can I have your attention?" The music faded down, and the crowd gathered around. Dave held a beautifully wrapped box in his hands. He looked at me with a beaming, theatrical smile. "Chloe, these past 5 years with you have been the best of my life. You are my rock, my partner, and my best friend. I wanted to get you something special to mark this milestone. Happy 30th birthday." The room awed. Jessica was standing near the fireplace, sipping a cocktail, watching with a smug, self-satisfied smirk. She knew what was in the box, or at least, what she thought was in the box. I stepped forward and took the gift. I carefully unwrapped the paper and opened the velvet box. Inside was a very lovely, very generic pair of pearl earrings, probably $200 at a local jeweler. I looked up at Dave. Then I looked past him, directly at Jessica's neck, where the $3,500 diamond sparkled. "They're beautiful, Dave," I said, projecting my voice so the whole room could hear. "Thank you." Though, I have to admit, I was expecting a diamond teardrop pendant. The color completely drained from Dave's face. He froze, his mouth slightly open, the charismatic smile dying on his lips. What?" he stammered. "A diamond teardrop pendant," I repeated clearly, stepping closer to him. "From Tiffany's. Cost about $3,500. I saw the receipt in your jacket pocket on Tuesday." The room went dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. Guests exchanged nervous, confused glances. Dave swallowed hard, sweat suddenly glistening on his forehead. "Chloe, baby, I don't know what you're talking about. Really?" I asked, turning my gaze slowly toward the fireplace. The crowd naturally parted, creating a clear line of sight between me and Jessica. Jessica looked like a deer caught in headlights. Her hand flew up instinctively to cover the necklace at her throat, but it was too late. Everyone in the room was staring at her. "Because it looks an awful lot like the one Jessica is wearing right now," I said. Murmurs erupted through the crowd. Sarah gasped dramatically, bless her. Dave looked back and forth between me and Jessica, panic fully taking over his features. "Chloe, you're drunk. You're making a scene," Dave tried to hiss, grabbing for my arm. I stepped back, out of his reach. "I have had one martini, David. I am completely sober." Jessica, trying to recover her composure, let out a high-pitched, nervous laugh. "Chloe, this is a misunderstanding. I bought this myself. Dave didn't." Before she could finish her lie, the doorbell rang. It wasn't a polite ring. It was 3 sharp, heavy buzzes that echoed through the tense silence of the living room. "I'll get that," I said cheerfully, breaking the tension. "I think the rest of my birthday surprises have arrived." Dave looked at me, pure terror in his eyes. "Who is at the door, Chloe?" I didn't answer. I walked calmly in my emerald heels across the hardwood floor, feeling the eyes of every single person in the room burning into my back. I grabbed the brass handle and pulled the front door wide open. Standing on my porch, illuminated by the porch light, was Arthur Pendleton. He was wearing a bespoke black suit, looking like an absolute titan of industry. He didn't look angry, he looked completely, terrifyingly cold. And standing right behind him, holding a very official-looking manila envelope, was Harrison, my divorce lawyer. "Good evening, Chloe," Arthur said, his voice carrying easily into the quiet house. "Am I late for the festivities?" "Right on time, Arthur," I smiled, stepping aside to let them in. I turned back to the living room. Dave looked confused, having never met Arthur. But Jessica? Jessica looked like she had just seen the Grim Reaper. Her expensive cocktail glass slipped from her hand and shattered into 100 pieces on my hardwood floor. The shattering of Jessica's crystal glass was the loudest sound in the universe. For 3 seconds, nobody breathed. The music hummed softly from the wall speakers, playing a jaunty jazz tune that felt completely absurd against the suffocating tension in the room. Arthur Pendleton stepped smoothly over the tiny shards of glass, his polished leather shoes clicking against the hardwood. He didn't look at the guests. He didn't look at Dave, who was standing frozen by the kitchen island like a man struck by lightning. Arthur's piercing blue eyes locked entirely onto Jessica, who had backed up until her shoulders hit the stone fireplace. "Arthur, what are you doing here?" Jessica's voice was a high, thin whisper, stripped of all its corporate confidence. Her fingers were clawing frantically at the diamond pendant around her neck, as if trying to rip off a brand that was burning her skin. "I could ask you the same thing, Jessica," Arthur replied, his voice calm, measured, and terrifyingly cold. "You told me you were attending a regional management seminar in Stamford this weekend. Funny. Stamford is 2 hours away, and yet here you are, celebrating a birthday in Connecticut with a man who apparently buys you high-end jewelry on company time." Murmurs rippled through the crowd like wind through tall grass. My neighbors, Karen and Tom, exchanged wide-eyed looks. Dave's coworkers from the office looked like they wanted to sink straight through the floorboards. Dave finally found his tongue, stepping forward with his hands raised defensively. "Hold on. Just hold on a second. Who the hell are you? And what are you doing in my house?" Arthur finally shifted his gaze to Dave. He looked my husband up and down with a slow, clinical disgust, as if inspecting a particularly greasy bug on a windshield. "My name is Arthur Pendleton," he said smoothly. "And this is my fiancé, or, I suppose I should say, my former fiancé." He pulled a small velvet box out of his suit pocket, opened it, and tossed it onto the coffee table. Inside rested a blinding, 4-carat emerald-cut engagement ring. "You can keep the necklace, Harrison. Consider it a parting gift from me. Because the apartment lease, the Mercedes, and the wedding, they're gone. Effective approximately 3 seconds ago." Jessica let out a choked, desperate sob. "Arthur, please, let me explain. It's not what you think. Dave and I were just colleagues. He was just helping me through a hard time." "Save it for your moving company, Jessica," Arthur snapped, his voice finally hardening into steel. "My lawyers will handle the retrieval of my property from your condo tomorrow morning. Do not attempt to contact me again." He turned on his heel, gave me a polite, respectful nod of his head, and walked out of the house as quietly as he had entered. The heavy front door clicked shut behind him, sealing the silence. All eyes snapped back to Dave. The color was completely gone from his face. He looked like a cornered animal, sweating profusely under the recessed lighting. He looked at Jessica, then at the stunned crowd of our closest friends, and finally, his eyes landed on me. The man who had gaslit me for months, who had made me feel crazy, paranoid, and small, was suddenly reduced to a stammering wreck. "Chloe," Dave choked out, taking a tentative step toward me, his hands outstretched in a pathetic plea. "Chloe, baby, please, let's talk about this. In private. This is insane. We can fix this." "Don't you dare," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the room with the force of a buzzsaw. I stepped forward, holding my head high in my emerald green dress. I felt no fear. I felt only a profound, liberating power. My divorce lawyer, Harrison, stepped out from the shadows near the entryway. He held up the manila envelope he had been carrying. "Mr. Harrison?" the lawyer asked smoothly, projecting his voice so everyone could hear. Dave blinked, staring at the stranger. "Who are you?" "My name is Harrison Vance." "I represent your wife," the attorney said, walking forward and placing a thick stack of legal documents right on top of the grazing table, next to the artisanal cheeses and crackers. These are your filed divorce papers. Grounds: adultery, alienation of affection, and intentional dissipation of marital assets. You've been served, David. Dave stared at the papers as if they were venomous snakes. Divorce? You're divorcing me over this? Chloe, we've been married for 5 years. We built a life. You built a lie, Dave, I said softly, walking over to the kitchen island and picking up my martini glass. I took a slow sip, never breaking eye contact with him. You wanted a double life. Well, congratulations. You officially have no wife, no home, and based on the fact that Arthur Pendleton is a major client and board member at your firm, I'm guessing you're about to have a lot of free time during the week, too. Dave's jaw dropped. The realization hit him like a physical blow. Arthur wasn't just some random guy. He was one of the primary commercial real estate titans who literally kept Dave's firm afloat. Jessica was already bolting. She grabbed her designer clutch off the chair, shoved past Sarah and a stunned group of coworkers, and practically threw herself out the front door into the humid night air, sobbing hysterically. Nobody tried to stop her. Dave stood alone in the center of our living room. The party was over. The guests were whispering, grabbing their coats, and quietly slipping out the door, eager to escape the toxic fallout of our collapsed marriage. Within 10 minutes, the house was empty, save for Sarah, my lawyer, and the lingering smell of expensive champagne. Sarah walked over to me, wrapping her arms around me in a fierce, tearful hug. "You are an absolute legend," she whispered in my ear. "That was the most cinematic thing I have ever witnessed in my entire life." "Thank you, Sarah," I murmured, kissing her cheek. My lawyer packed up his briefcase, gave me a professional nod, and let himself out. That left just the two of us. Me, standing in my emerald dress in the middle of a spotless, beautiful living room, and Dave, slumped against the kitchen counter, staring blankly at the floor. The silence that settled over the house after everyone left was not heavy or oppressive. For the first time in over a year, it felt clean. It felt like the air after a violent summer thunderstorm, cool, oxygenated, and entirely fresh. Dave didn't leave that night. He couldn't. Where would he go? Jessica's place was locked to him now, courtesy of Arthur. His corporate reputation was in absolute tatters, and his bank accounts were inextricably linked to mine. He spent the rest of the night sitting on the edge of the guest room bed, with his head in his hands, looking like a man who had traded his entire future for a cheap office fling. I didn't sleep in our bedroom. I slept in the guest room down the hall, locking the door firmly behind me. I didn't cry once. The tears had all been spent weeks ago, in the dark of night, wondering what I was doing wrong. Now, looking back, I realized I hadn't been doing anything wrong, at all. I had simply been married to a coward. The next morning, Sunday, the dismantling of our life began with quiet, methodical precision. While Dave was still cowering upstairs, nursing a splitting headache and the raw reality of his ruined life, I was busy. I called the movers. Thanks to the ironclad prenup my father had insisted we sign before our wedding, something Dave had arrogantly dismissed back then. The house, the savings, and my interior design business were entirely protected. Dave walked into the marriage with 2 suitcases and a used Honda. He would leave the exact same way. At 10 a.m., the doorbell rang. It wasn't the movers yet. It was Arthur Pendleton. I opened the door, surprised to see him standing there in a casual cashmere sweater and slacks, holding 2 takeaway cups of artisan coffee. He looked tired, the sharp edges of industrial dominance softened by the dull ache of betrayal, but his eyes were clear. "Good morning, Chloe," he said quietly, offering me one of the cups. "I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all, Arthur." "Come in." I stepped aside, letting him into the foyer. We walked out onto the back patio, sitting at the wrought iron table where, just last night, Dave and Jessica had thought they were the smartest people in the world. The morning sun was warm, filtering through the oak trees in our backyard. "How are you holding up?" Arthur asked, taking a sip of his coffee. "Surprisingly well," I admitted, looking out over the manicured lawn. "I thought I'd be devastated, but mostly, I just feel light, like an anchor was cut off my chest." Arthur let out a dry, humorless chuckle. "I know the feeling. My lawyers spent the morning locking down my accounts, changing the locks on the condo, and drafting the legal dissolution of our engagement. Jessica tried calling me 6 times this morning. I blocked her number. It's a harsh way to wake up, I said softly. Yes, but necessary. Arthur looked over at me, his gaze softening with genuine respect. You handled that masterfully last night, Chloe. Most women would have caused a scene, thrown punches, or curled up in a ball. You orchestrated a symphony of justice. I learned from the best. I smiled faintly. When someone hands you a knife, you don't fall on it, you turn it around. We sat in comfortable silence for a long time, two strangers bound together by the wreckage of our unfaithful partners. It wasn't romantic, we were both too battered by deception to think about tomorrow in those terms, but it was a profound, grounding connection. Two survivors sitting in the ruins, realizing the fire had cleared the way for something entirely new. By noon, Dave finally dragged himself downstairs. He looked like he had aged 10 years overnight. His eyes were red-rimmed, his clothes rumpled. He stopped in the doorway of the patio, seeing Arthur and me sitting together talking quietly over coffee. He opened his mouth, looking at me with a desperate, pathetic plea. Chloe, can we talk? Please? Just 5 minutes. We can fix this. We can go to counseling. I'll quit my job. I'll block Jessica forever. Just don't do this. I didn't yell. I didn't curse. I simply took a sip of my coffee, looked him straight in the eyes, and said the words he had thrown at me so many times before, when I had dared to question his late nights and his work wife. David, I said calmly, my voice steady and cold. You're being paranoid. We're just colleagues. Don't be weird about it. His face went completely slack. The color drained out of him entirely. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He turned around, walked back inside, and I heard the heavy thud of his suitcase hitting the floor upstairs. My 30th birthday hadn't gone the way I planned. I had lost a husband, a home, and 5 years of my life to a lie. But as I sat in the morning sun, watching the light dance across the patio, I realized something wonderful. I hadn't lost my life. I had finally reclaimed it. And the best part? My story was only just beginning. Betrayal hurts, but revenge served cold is the ultimate liberation. When the person you trusted most tries to make a fool of you, never let them win, rise above, expose the truth, and take back your power. If this story of justice and sweet revenge resonated with your soul, don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more jaw-dropping real-life dramas.